The War Committee chamber was a monument to cold peace. Its circular walls were a seamless, pearl-white alloy, and it hummed with a sound so low it was felt in the bones, not heard. In the center of the room, a wide, flat disk of dark glass served as a floor. Around it, in tiered rows that seemed to float in the air, were the representatives of the Galactic Concord. They were holograms, shimmering forms of insectoid shapes, gaseous clouds, and multi-limbed beings. They did not move much. They observed. Ambassador Choi Sung stood at the edge of the dark disk. She was a human woman of 50, her black hair streaked with silver and tied back sharply. Her hands were clasped in front of her simple gray suit, betraying no emotion. To her right stood General Park Day, a solid man of 65 with a face like old leather. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes were tired. Before them, on the dark glass, a light began to glow. It formed into a complex star map, zooming in on a small, rocky world designated Rigel 7. A string of symbols in the common galactic script scrolled beside it, detailing a tragedy. A voice filled the room. It was not from any of the holograms. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a synthesized tone that was meant to be neutral. It was the voice of the tribunal executor, a being known only as Braun. "The record is clear," Braun stated. The Kthari hive swarm vexation descended upon the civilian refuge outpost on Rigel 7. There were 927 sentient beings taking shelter. The outpost's security was minimal. The Kthari cleansing pattern is 99.9% effective. Yet, the post-battle scan shows Kthari biosign losses that are statistically impossible. The star map vanished, replaced by a haunting image from a surviving security camera. It showed a narrow, steam-filled corridor made of metal. Something moved in the mist. It was a human form, clad in dark green armor smeared with black and violet fluids. It moved with a slow, painful determination, dragging a smaller, three-limbed alien child behind it before pushing the child into an open maintenance hatch and sealing it shut. Then it turned, raising a rifle, and the feed dissolved into static. "One Earth Marine," Braun said. "Serial number 77,834 Gene. The sole surviving military entity." The Kthari hive mind claims a loss of no fewer than 800 warrior forms to this single unit. They cry foul. They claim hidden weapons, external support, a treaty violation. The Concord must have truth. We require a verified audit of the incident. General Park's jaw tightened. He took a small step forward. "Executor Braun, the Marine in question, Sergeant Jean, is recovering from severe physical and psychological trauma. A deep memory retrieval is not a simple review. It is invasive. It relives the trauma." "Your concern is noted, General Park," Braun replied, the voice devoid of any warmth. "But the stability of the Concord is at stake. If humanity employed a forbidden technology, the consequences are severe. If the Kthari are lying to discredit a new member species, that, too, must be known. The truth is in the soldier's mind. We will see what he saw. We will count what he did." From the side of the chamber, another human stepped onto the dark disk. This was Captain Mira, a logistics and tactical analyst. She was younger, her face tense. She carried a data slate. "General Ambassador," she said, her voice low but firm. "The medical team strongly advises against this. Sergeant Jin's neural pathways are still healing. A forced memory dive could cause permanent damage. There are other logs, sensor echoes, which the Kthari dismiss as fabricated," Ambassador Choi said, turning her head slightly towards Mira. Her voice was quiet but final. "They demand the source memory. If we refuse, they will assume guilt and withdraw from the ceasefire. Billions more will die. We must show we have nothing to hide, even if the truth is difficult." Mira looked down at her data slate. On it was a medical image of a brain, several areas flashing red. Next to it was a service photo of a young man with a calm face and short black hair. Sergeant Jean. She had read his file. He was not a Special Forces legend. He was a mechanic from a place called Busan who joined the Marines to see the stars. She closed her eyes for a second, then gave a single, stiff nod. General Park let out a slow breath. Very well. He looked up at the silent, watching holograms of the War Committee. You will have your audit. You will see the events of Rigel 7 through the eyes of Sergeant Jean. But know this, his old voice grew harder. You are not watching a weapons test log. You are auditing a man's worst day. Remember that when you start your counting. He gave a nod to Mira. She entered a command into her slate. Across the chamber, a section of the wall slid open. A medical pod, sleek and white, floated silently in. Inside, visible through a clear canopy, was Sergeant Jean. He was unconscious, his face pale, a network of thin wires connected to his temples. The pod settled gently onto the dark glass floor between the humans and the watching galaxy. The hologram seemed to lean in slightly. The link is established, Mira reported, her voice hollow. Neural sync at 78% and holding. Priming episodic memory from the onset of the Kthari ground assault. Executor Braun's voice filled the room once more. Begin the playback. Project for the committee. Let us establish the baseline truth of the Rigel 7 incident. The dark glass floor of the tribunal chamber glowed brightly. Then, the room vanished, replaced by the chaotic, terrifying first-person view of Sergeant Jean, waking up to the sound of sirens and the screams of breaking metal. The story and the counting began. The world that bloomed across the War Committee's chamber was one of noise, panic, and fire. It was not the clean, strategic view of a battle map. It was the jarring, lurching, smell-filled reality of Sergeant Jin's memory. The committee saw through his eyes. They felt the outpost floor shudder under his boots. Alarms shrieked in a discordant mix of human and alien tones. The air in the narrow corridor was already thick with smoke and the sharp, acidic scent of Kthari plasma burns. Jin's view swung left and right, fast and practiced. His breathing was loud in the memory, a controlled rhythm against the chaos. The tactical display in the corner of his helmet showed the nightmare in cool blue lines. The outpost, a honeycomb of life support systems and refugee bays, was bleeding red enemy markers from the northern landing zone. They were everywhere. His first orders crackled in his ear, the voice of his squad leader already strained. Jean, they've blown the main bulkhead. Fall back to the geothermal vent nexus. We'll funnel them there. Protect the civilian choke point at Vent 4. Acknowledged. Jin's own voice replied, younger and tighter than the man in the med pod. His view moved, his body already running. The memory did not show a hero standing firm. It showed a man in relentless tactical retreat. He was not fighting to win. He was fighting to slow down. He reached a large, industrial chamber where huge pipes roared with the sound of rushing steam. Heat washed over him, visible as waves in the air. This was the geothermal nexus. 3 other Marines were already there, taking position behind machinery. A group of about 20 civilians, a mix of furry Glyn and slender Tell, huddled in a terrified cluster by a sealed door. Then the Kthari came. They poured from 3 access tunnels like a flood of living shadow. They were insectoid, taller than a man, with 4 multi-jointed limbs that ended in blade-like points. Their chittering was a sound that scraped at the mind. Jin's view focused, his rifle rising. The pulse rifle fired bolts of blue-white energy. The first shot hit a leading Kthari in the thorax. It shrieked, stumbled, but kept coming. The second shot hit the same spot. It went down. The kill was clinical. A third one lunged from the side. Jean sidestepped, let its momentum carry it, and kicked its leg joint. It stumbled into a scalding steam pipe. It did not get up. The committee watched, their silent holograms absorbing the raw data. They saw the other Marines fall, one by one, overwhelmed by numbers. They heard the screams, cut short. They felt Jin's heart hammer against his ribs. His ammunition counter blinked a warning. He was down to his last power cell. Fall back! Through the maintenance vents! He yelled to the civilians, his voice raw. He gestured to a narrow, grated opening in the floor. The Glyn went first, then the Tell. Jean provided cover, his shots becoming more spaced, more desperate. A Kthari blade sliced through the air where his head had been a second before. He dropped into the vent shaft after the last civilian, sealing the hatch above him. The darkness was cut only by his helmet lamp. The air was hot, wet, and full of the sound of scratching on metal above. For minutes, the memory was just that, running, crawling, guiding the group through a labyrinth of hot, dripping tunnels. He helped a young Tell who had twisted its ankle. He stopped them at a junction, listening for the skittering of claws, then motioned them the other way. This was not combat. This was shepherding. They reached a small, secure storage room, the safe point for Vent 4. Jean ushered the aliens in. "Stay. Seal the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but a human voice. Understand?" The lead Glynn, its large eyes wide, nodded. Jean turned to leave. A small, three-limbed Tell child, the one from the security feed, grabbed one of his armor straps. It made a soft, whistling sound of fear. Jin's hand, big and clumsy in its armored glove, gently pried the child's grip loose. He gave the child a slight push towards the others inside the room. "It's okay," his memory voice said, a lie wrapped in kindness. "Go." He slammed the heavy door shut and heard the lock engage. He was alone in the steam-filled corridor. The committee watched as he turned, his rifle now almost dead. He looked at the network of pipes around him, his gaze fixed on a large, rusted valve wheel. He moved to it not to fight but to work. He strained against the wheel. With a final, grating shriek of metal, it turned. High pressure, superheated steam erupted from a ruptured joint further down the corridor, just as a pack of 5 Cthari rounded the bend. The blinding, scorching cloud enveloped them. Their chittering turned to agonized shrieks, then silence. The steam filled the passage, creating a temporary deadly wall. Jean did not celebrate. He simply turned and moved away, deeper into the belly of the outpost, his breathing still that same controlled rhythm. In the tribunal chamber, the first set of numbers appeared on a side screen, cold and official. Direct engagements, event nexus, and withdrawal Cathari warriors neutralized. 11 civilian lives confirmed preserved. 23 the holograms of the committee flickered. There was no stunning skill here, no super weapon. They saw a soldier using terrain, using mechanics, prioritizing preservation over destruction. It was effective, even admirable in its grim way. But it was not impossible. It was not the answer to the loss of hundreds. Executor Braun's voice broke the silence of the memory playback. Proceed to the next significant engagement locus. The machine room. The view through Jin's eyes shifted, moving deeper into the roaring, mechanical heart of the outpost. The temperature spiked. The real question was about to begin. The memory pushed deeper, following the path of Jin's desperate retreat. The polished chamber of the war committee was gone, replaced by the groaning, shrieking metal intestines of the outpost. The air in Jin's memory was now almost solid with heat and the smell of ozone and burnt chitin. He was in the primary machine room. It was a vast cathedral of industry, dominated by the massive cylindrical housing of the fusion-powered atmospheric processor. The machine thrummed with a deep, powerful beat that vibrated in the teeth. Around it, a maze of walkways, coolant pipes, and power conduits glowed with hazard striping. This was the lungs of the refuge, and it was failing. Jin's view was shaky. A warning glyph flashed persistently in the lower left of his helmet display. Suit breach, left torso. Biosigns, elevated. Stimulant administered. He moved along a high gantry, his steps uneven. Below, the floor teemed with movement. Thari warriors. Dozens of them. They weren't searching anymore. They were systematically dismantling control panels, trying to shut down life support for the entire outpost. His rifle was a dead weight in his hands. The power cell was exhausted. He discarded it, the clatter lost in the industrial roar. He drew his sidearm, a solid projectile pistol. It held 12 rounds. He did not fire. Instead, he crouched, his breathing harsh in the committee's audio feed. He was not looking at the aliens. He was studying the machine. His eyes traced the path of a thick, insulated pipe labeled primary cryogenic coolant line gamma. He is assessing the environment, a soft, analytical voice noted in the chamber. It was Mira, speaking almost to herself, her eyes fixed on the projection. Jean moved. He did not go down to fight. He crawled along the gantry to a service panel. He pried it open with his knife, revealing a nest of glowing cables and manual overrides. His hands, even in armored gloves, worked with a precise urgency. He bypassed a safety lock. A series of loud, metallic clunks echoed through the chamber. On the floor below, a section of the gamma coolant line shuddered. Then, with a sound like a dying beast, it ruptured. A torrent of milky white, super-chilled liquid exploded from the breach, spraying across a wide section of the machine room floor. The Kthari caught in the deluge did not simply freeze. Their exothermic biology reacted violently. Their carapaces cracked with sharp reports like gunfire. They thrashed, their movements slowing to a stop in seconds, encased in a rapidly hardening shell of their own frozen bodily fluids and coolant. Jean did not watch. He was already moving, descending a service ladder. A Kthari warrior, untouched by the coolant, lunged at him from a blind spot. Jin's view spun. He fired his pistol twice. The rounds sparked against the creature's thick head carapace. It swiped a blade limb. Jean ducked, and the blade sheared through the ladder's support strut instead. The ladder twisted. Jean fell the last 10 feet, landing hard on a lower walkway. The breath was knocked from him. The Kthari leapt down after him. Jean scrambled back. His hand found not his pistol, but a long, heavy wrench left behind by a technician. He swung it as the creature landed. The metal connected with a sickening crunch on a slender leg joint. The Kthari screeched, faltering. Jean swung again, and again, until the thing stopped moving. He stood, chest heaving, the wrench dripping with violet ichor. He dropped it. The kill was ugly, brutal, and utterly devoid of glory. It was work. Another group of 3 warriors clattered onto the walkway from the other end. Jean looked at his empty pistol. He looked at the sparking, severed power conduit hanging from the ceiling where the blade had cut. He backed up, leading them on. He reached a large, drum-shaped piece of equipment, a power converter for the secondary grids. Its access panel was open. Wires spilled out. With a final glance at the approaching Kthari, Jean reached into the open converter, grabbed a handful of high-capacity cabling, and yanked at a fountain of blue-white sparks erupted. The lights in that section of the machine room died. But more importantly, the energy surge traveled back through the walkway's control systems. The safety railings on either side of the 3 Kthari emitted a sudden, devastating capacitive discharge. The creatures convulsed, smoking, and fell over the edge into the darkness below. Silence, except for the deep thrum of the atmospheric processor, reclaimed the immediate area. Jean slumped against the converter, sliding down to sit on the walkway. His hands were trembling. He pulled a small medpack from his leg webbing and injected a coagulant into his suit breech. The numbers in the committee's chamber updated. Direct engagements, machine room Kthari warriors neutralized, 47 methodology. Environmental, coolant line, melee electrical hazard. The holograms were utterly still. There was no masterful swordsmanship, no pinpoint shooting. They had watched a wounded animal use every tool in its den to survive. A wrench. A luo seguir. A pre-existing pipe. It was ingenuity born of absolute desperation. It was shocking in its practicality, but the total was still only 58. Nowhere near the hundreds claimed. Then Jin's memory self looked up, his gaze fixed on the main control console for the atmospheric processor. It was a large station across a wide, open platform. The path to it was clear, but he did not move towards it. He remained sitting, his head leaning back against the metal. He seemed to be gathering strength or perhaps saying goodbye. Executor Braun's voice was flat. The subject's biosigns are critical. He is likely seeking a final defensive position or a place to expire. Continue. In the chamber, Myra's nails were digging into her palms. She knew what was coming next, and it wasn't a final stand. It was something else entirely. She willed the memory to show them, to make them see. The deep thrum of the atmospheric processor was the only sound in Jin's memory. For a long moment, the view from his eyes did not move. He simply sat on the walkway, his breath making fog on the inside of his damaged helmet. The alert for low oxygen was now a constant, pulsing light in the corner of his vision. The War Committee watched, their silent judgment a pressure in the sterile air of the tribunal. They saw a dying soldier, his immediate threats gone, waiting for the end. To them, the story was concluding. The impossible kill count was explained. A mix of environment, desperation, and luck. Regrettable, but not revolutionary. Then, Gene moved. He pushed himself up from the deck with a grunt of pain that vibrated through the audio feed. He did not look for a weapon. He did not try to find a safer hiding spot. Instead, he began a slow, limping walk across the open platform towards the main control console of the giant processor. What is he doing? The thought seemed to whisper through the holographic observers. The console was not a defensive position. It was a large, exposed panel of lights and screens. Gene reached the console and leaned heavily against it. His gloved hands, stained with dirt and violet ichor, hovered over the controls. For a second, he just looked at them, his breathing loud and wet. Then his hands began to work. He called up a complex schematic of the processor on the main screen. It showed a web of magnetic field coils, particulate scrubbers, and resonance dampeners. He bypassed a primary safety protocol. A warning siren blared for 2 seconds before he silenced it. In the tribunal, Mira stood rigid, her eyes locked on the memory. This was the part she had decoded from the wreckage logs. This was the part that made no sense to anyone until she had run the numbers. Gene was not trying to send a distress call. He was not trying to vent the chamber or cause an explosion. His actions were precise, deliberate. He isolated a specific subsystem, the tertiary magnetic field regulators. He began recalibrating them, inputting a long string of numerical values. He adjusted frequency modulators, setting them to a precise low-cycle oscillation. He is reprogramming the atmospheric processor, Executor Braun's voice stated, a hint of confusion now bleeding through its artificial neutrality. For what purpose? This machinery cleans air. It cannot become a significant weapon. Gene worked for 11 minutes. The committee watched, their earlier interest fading back into impatience. This looked like the final, confused act of a brain-addled man, fiddling with machines as his life bled away. The numbers on the side screen stayed frozen at 58. Then, a new sound entered the memory. A skittering, clicking sound from a service duct across the platform. A single Cathari warrior emerged. It was wounded, one of its blade limbs broken and hanging useless. It saw the human at the console and let out a sharp, aggressive chitter. It began to advance, its movements jerky but determined. Jin's view flicked to the creature, then back to the console. His hands did not stop. He typed in one final sequence and hit a large, red, execute, button. The console screen flashed. Magnetic resonance override active. Field stability at 89%. Only then did he turn to face the threat. He had no rifle. His pistol was empty. The wrench was gone. He looked around, his view sweeping the console. His hand closed around the only tool there. A long, heavy industrial welding torch, still connected to a gas line on the floor. He lifted it. It was clumsy, not meant for combat. The Cathari charged. What followed was not a fight. It was a brutal, ugly struggle for survival. Gene sidestepped the creature's first lunge and brought the torch down on its back. The carapace was tough. The metal cylinder just bounced off. The Cathari spun, its good blade slicing through the air. Gene stumbled back, the tip grazing his chest plate. With a shriek of metal, he fell against the console. The Cathari reared up for a final strike. Gene did the only thing left. He thumbed the ignition trigger on the welding torch. A jet of blue-white flame, hotter than a star's surface, erupted from the tip. He shoved it forward, not as a weapon but as a shield. The flame engulfed the Cathari's head and thorax. The creature's shriek was terrible. It flailed, blind and burning, its limbs thrashing. One last, wild swing hit Gene in the helmet. The view spun, cracked, and then went dark for a second. When it cleared, the Cathari was on the ground, smoking and still. Gene was on his knees beside it. The welding torch lay on the deck, its flame still burning a small, angry hole into the metal. Jin's hand went to his helmet. A large crack webbed across the visor. He looked down at the dead creature, then up at the console. The screen still glowed with its confirmation message. He gave a single, slow nod, a gesture of grim satisfaction that had nothing to do with the kill at his feet. Then, his strength left him. He collapsed onto his side, his view of the room tilting. The last thing the committee saw from his eyes was the steady, rhythmic pulse of a status light on the console, blinking in time with the deep thrum of the giant machine. Then, the memory faded to black. The tribunal chamber was silent. The holograms flickered. Executor Braun finally spoke. The subject is incapacitated. The final direct kill count, 59. The machine room is secured, but his actions at the console served no immediate tactical purpose. It was a waste of final moments. The mystery of the Cthari's claimed losses remains. He was about to order the memory feed terminated when Mira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Wait," she said. "You're asking the wrong question. You asked, how many did he kill? You should be asking, what did he just turn on?" All attention shifted to her. On the floor, in the med pod, Sergeant Jean remained still, his final, calculated act waiting to be understood. The silence in the tribunal chamber was heavy. The last image of Sergeant Jin's memory, the blinking console light, hung in the air. The holograms of the war committee were frozen, waiting. The kill count of 59 was final. It was impressive for a lone soldier, but it was not impossible. It did not explain the Cthari's claim of hundreds lost. Executor Braun's voice broke the quiet. The audit is conclusive. The subject displayed remarkable tenacity and environmental utilization. However, the discrepancy remains unresolved. The subject's final actions were irrational. He compromised his own survival to operate a life support machine. This does not support the Cthari's allegations, but it does not absolve. "It does," Mira said, stepping forward onto the dark glass disc. Her voice was clear and firm, cutting off the executor. All the holographic gazes shifted to her. General Park watched her, his expression unreadable. Ambassador Choi gave a small, slow nod. Mira held up her data slate. "You have been auditing a battle. You have not been auditing the weapon." She tapped the slate. The main projection changed. It no longer showed Jin's memory. It showed a complex web of data, energy signatures, communication traffic logs, and battlefield movement patterns from the broader Rigel 7 theater. The data was timestamped to the moment Jean activated the console override. Sergeant Jean did not try to build a bomb or call for help, Mira explained. He asked himself a different question. What is this machine for? And what else can it do? She zoomed in on a specific frequency band. The atmospheric processor's tertiary magnetic field is designed to align charged particles for filtering. It creates a stable, low-frequency resonance across a wide area. Jean recalibrated it. He changed the frequency. She pulled up another window. It showed the known command and control frequency of the Cthari hive mind for the Rigel 7 swarm cluster. The two frequency graphs were different. Then, Mira overlaid them with a third set of data. Jin's input into the console. The lines snapped into a horrifying alignment. Jin's recalibration had shifted the processor's resonance to precisely match the carrier wave of the local hive queen's neural commands. A murmur, a digital rustle of surprise, passed through the committee's holograms. He turned the lungs of the outpost into the largest psychoacoustic weapon in the sector, Mira said, her words simple and hard. It did not fire a shot. It broadcast a signal. A perfect, powerful copy of the hive queen's own voice. The main screen changed again. It showed the wider planetary battle map. Before the timestamp, red Cthari units moved in coordinated, swirling patterns, surrounding human and allied positions. Then, the timestamp clicked over to the moment of Jin's activation. The change was not instant, but it was swift and catastrophic. The neat red formations began to stutter. Units stopped advancing. They moved in erratic circles. Then, conflict icons flashed, red markers attacking other red markers. The signal was pure, but it carried no intelligent commands, Mira continued. It was noise, static, To a warrior drone linked directly to the hive mind, it was like their queen suddenly screaming nonsense directly into their brains. It caused systemic neurological failure, panic, aggression, confusion. They turned on the nearest source of threat, each other. The battle map dissolved into chaos. The cascade effect was visual, mathematical, and stunning. Isolated fights between Kthari units spread like a virus through their networked minds. Whole sectors descended into frenzied, self-destructive infighting. Mira looked away from the data and directly at the shimmering image of Executor Braun. You asked for the kill ratio of one Earth Marine. You were looking for a number you could understand. A number of shots fired, of blades swung. She tapped her slate one final time. The side screen, which had listed Jin's direct kills, wiped clean. New text scrolled, bold and final. Subject: Sergeant Jin, Earth Marine Direct, confirmed eliminations. 59 indirect casualties via environmental hazard. 112 strategic cascade casualties via hive resonance disruption. Estimated 400 plus total tactical impact. Neutralization of Kthari 7th Cleanse Swarm, approximate. 87% combat effective loss. The number 400 glowed in the silent chamber. There was no sound. The galactic representatives, for whom war was a calculus of fleet sizes and energy yields, had no protocol for this. They had audited a soldier and found a physicist. They had looked for a killer and found a thinker who used a factory tool to break an enemy's mind. General Park finally spoke, his voice gravelly with pride and sorrow. He wasn't just trying to survive. He was a Marine. His duty was to protect the civilians in that refuge, and to hurt the enemy so they could never come back. He used the only weapon he had left that could do both: the enemy's own mind. Ambassador Choi stepped forward, placing herself beside the still form of Jean in the medpod. She addressed the committee, her tone soft but unyielding. You asked for a kill ratio. You found one. But you also found our answer. Humanity does not just make better guns. We make new tools from old things. We find levers. Even if we are bleeding out, we will look for the lever. Sergeant Jean found it. The question is not whether this violates any treaty. The question is whether you understand what you are dealing with. She let the silence hang for a long moment. Do you understand the difference now? Executor Braun did not reply. None of the holograms did. The projection of the chaotic battle map, and the stark, impossible number beside it, was answer enough. Mira walked to the medpod. She looked down at the pale, still face of Sergeant Jean. The medical display showed his brain activity, quiet but stable. She reached out and placed a simple, insulated cup on the console next to the pod. A small wisp of steam rose from it. Hot tea, brought from the human quarters. It was not an analyst's gesture. It was a comrade's, an honor for the mind, not the myth. The committee watched this too, this simple human ritual, and it was perhaps the most confusing and the most telling thing they had seen all day. The silence in the tribunal chamber did not break. It settled, heavy and complete, like dust after an explosion. The glowing number, 400 plus, seemed to pulse in the air. A cold, digital ghost of the chaos gene had unleashed. Executor Braun's voice, when it finally came, had lost its sterile certainty. It was slower, each word measured. The data is verified? It is, Mira said. She did not look away from the War Committee. Cross-referenced with the Kthari's own swarm collapse reports, which they filed as unexplained system failure. They did not know what broke their swarm. Now you do. One of the holograms, a shimmering, crystalline entity representing the mineral-based silic, pulsed with a soft light. His translated voice was a low chime. This is not warfare. This is a trick, a manipulation of consciousness. It violates the principle of defined combat. General Park's bark of a laugh was short and without humor. A trick? They were cleansing a civilian refuge. They were killing children. Sergeant Jean used a noise machine to make them stop. Where in your principles is the rule that says we must only fight the body and never the mind that controls it. The chamber remained tense. The revelation was too new, too lateral for their doctrines. Then, a new figure resolved in the holographic array. It was blocky, angular, and glowed a hostile, deep crimson. The Cathari representative. Its voice was a series of clicks and rasps synthesized into speech, dripping with fury. Deception, poison for the mind. This is a forbidden art. The human is a weapon of psychic horror. He and his kind must be quarantined. The losses are irrelevant. The method is a contagion. Ambassador Choi did not flinch. She turned to face the red hologram. The method was a magnetic field tuned to a frequency your own queen uses. Is your own command link a forbidden art? He did not invent a new poison. He turned your own voice against you. The only horror here is the one your swarm brought to Rigel 7. He ended it. Would you have preferred he killed all 2,400 of your warriors with a bomb? Would that have been more honorable? The Cathari hologram flickered, unable to form a coherent rebuttal. The logic was inescapable. Their own technology, their own biological weakness, had been used as the lever. Executor Braun spoke again, aiming for finality. The audit is complete. The Concord recognizes the factual outcome of the Rigel 7 incident. The human subject's actions, while unorthodox, fall within the accepted bounds of tactical ingenuity. No treaty violation is found. The Cathari grievance is dismissed. The words were a legal conclusion, but they hung in the air empty. The committee was not thinking about law. They were thinking about the number. They were thinking about a dying man, ignoring a blade coming at him, to type one more command into a machine. The Silic chimed again, its light thoughtful. This lever, as you call it, could it be reproduced? Is this a common human capability? Mira and General Park exchanged a glance. This was the real question, the dangerous one. It is a common human impulse, General Park said carefully. We are toolmakers. We see a rock, we think hammer. We see a stream, we think wheel. Sergeant Jean saw an air filter and thought weapon. Another human might have seen something else. But given a problem, we will look for a lever. Any lever. That is what you must understand. It is not a weapon we built. It is a way we think. The implications spread through the chamber, more profound than any battle report. Humanity was not just another species with ships and guns. They were a species that, when cornered, would reprogram the universe itself to fight back. The holograms began to wink out, one by one, their representatives withdrawing to process this new, unsettling variable. The Cathari representative vanished last, its crimson light dissolving with a final, angry crackle soon. Only the humans remained in the vast, quiet chamber with the floating medpod. The lights slowly brightened to a normal level. The projection faded. For a moment, no one moved. Then General Park let out a long, weary sigh. He walked over to the medpod and placed a hand on the clear canopy, looking down at Jean. Rest easy, Sergeant, he murmured. You just rewrote the book. Mira stood by her cup of tea, now gone cold. The adrenaline of the presentation was leaving her, replaced by a deep, hollow fatigue. Will they come after him? The Cathari. They might try, Ambassador Choi said, joining them. She looked thoughtful, not fearful. But now the whole Concord knows his face and his number. Making him a martyr would be worse for them. He is safer as a legend. She looked at Mira. Your analysis was flawless, Captain. You made them see it. Mira shook her head. I just showed the data. He did the impossible. She looked at Jin's peaceful face. He must have figured out their command frequency in the middle of it all. How? General Park almost smiled. His file. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was a comm specialist before he switched to the Marines. He liked puzzles. He gave the pod a gentle pat. Come on, let's get him back to our ship. His war is over. As medical staff floated the pod away, Mira lingered for a moment in the empty chamber. She looked at the spot where the staggering number had glowed. It wasn't just a kill ratio. It was a message to the galaxy, scrawled not in weapons fire, but in ingenuity and desperate courage. The message was simple. Beware the levers. She picked up her cold cup, turned, and followed her people home. The journey back to the human vessel UMC Perseverance was silent. The medical pod carrying Sergeant Jean was transferred from the sterile bay of the Concorde station into the warmer, more cluttered hangar of the human ship. The air here smelled of machine oil, recycled oxygen, and coffee. It was not quiet. The low thrum of the engines and the distant chatter of crew were a constant, familiar hum. It was home. Mira walked beside the pod as it was guided to the infirmary. Her part was done. The data was filed. The committee was satisfied, or at least stunned into silence. Yet, she felt a pull she could not explain. It was more than professional curiosity. She had been inside the man's most terrible memories. She felt a debt owed, a witness to a private storm. In the infirmary, the medical officer, a brisk woman named Dr. Lee, gave a rundown. Physically, he's healing. The suit did its job. The psychological trauma is the deeper wound. The memory dive didn't help. He's stable, but we're keeping him under for another cycle to let his mind settle. When he wakes up, Mira asked, her voice quiet, what will he know? Dr. Lee sighed. He'll know he survived. He may have flashes of the audit like a bad dream. We'll tell him the outcome, that he saved lives. The full scope. That's a lot for anyone to carry. The number. She shook her head. That's a weight for history books, not for one man's shoulders. Mira nodded. She understood. Jean had acted to save 23 civilians in a room. The cascade of deaths that followed was a consequence, not an intention. Carrying the weight of those thousands would break anyone. 2 days passed. Reports filtered in. The Kthari had pulled back their frontline swarms, their coordination seemingly more cautious, as if listening for strange echoes in their own networks. The legend of the ghost of Rigel 7 was already spreading through the Concorde, a story told in whispers. Some species looked at humans with new fear, others with a wary curiosity. On the third day, Dr. Lee sent a message to Myra's quarters. He's awake. He's calm. He asked if the people in the vent made it. You can see him if you like. Mira went. She did not bring data slates or reports. She brought 2 cups of tea from the mess hall. Jean was sitting up in a bed by a viewport. Stars streaked by in silent, long lines. He looked smaller out of his armor, younger. His eyes were fixed on the passing stars, his face calm but empty. He turned as she entered. Captain, he said, his voice a rough whisper from disuse. He tried to sit straighter. At ease, Sergeant, Mira said, offering a small smile. She placed a cup on his side table. It's just tea, and it's just Mira. He looked at the cup, then at her. His eyes were dark, deeply tired, but they focused on her. They said, an analyst. You were there, in the hearing. I was, Mira said, taking the chair beside his bed. I saw what happened, all of it. He looked back out the viewport. A muscle in his jaw tightened. The Glynn, the Tell children, did they? All 23 you sealed in that room were recovered alive, Mira said, her voice firm and clear. They are safe. You saved them, Jean. You completed your mission. He closed his eyes for a long moment. A single breath shuddered out of him, a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. Some of the terrible tension in his shoulders eased. It was the only answer he had truly needed. After a pause, he spoke again, still not looking at her. They showed you the machine room, the console. Yes, I could hear them, he whispered, in my helmet before it cracked. The comms were full of their chatter. Not words, a pulse, a rhythm. It was everywhere, tying them all together. He finally looked at her, his expression one of pained curiosity. I just made a louder pulse. A wrong one. Did it? Did it do anything? Mira chose her words with care. She would not lie, but she would not bury him. It did. Confused the swarm in your area. It gave the fleet the opening they needed to launch a counterattack and evacuate the remaining outposts. Your actions had a wider effect than you could have known. He absorbed this, his brow furrowed. He was a comms specialist. He could guess at the principles of a jammer of causing disarray. He seemed to accept this scaled-up, tactical result. The concept of thousands turning on each other was too vast, too abstract. His mind, wisely, did not reach for it. "Good," he said simply. He took a sip of the tea. "That's good." They sat in a comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the stars fly by. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you heal," Mira said. "Then you have a long leave. Back to Earth if you want. After that, your choice. They'll probably want to make you an instructor. Teach others about field improvisation." A faint, almost ghost of a smile touched Jin's lips. It was the first she had seen. "I was just fixing the air filter," he said. A dry, quiet joke for only himself. Myra's own smile was real. "You fixed more than that." She stood to leave, giving him the peace he needed. At the door, she turned. He was looking out the viewport again, the cup of tea warm in his hands, a living man back among the starlight, not a legend in a tribunal. "Sergeant Jean?" she said. He glanced back. "Thank you." He gave a small, slow nod, not as a hero accepting praise, but as one soldier to another. An acknowledgement of a duty done. Mira walked back into the corridor of the bustling ship. The weight of the galactic event, the stunning ratio, the political shockwaves, it all still existed. But here, in the heart of the human fleet, life went on. The story of Rigel 7 would be told and retold, growing in the telling. But the truth, she knew, was here. It was in a quiet room with a view of the stars, where a man found his peace not in a number, but in the simple, profound knowledge that the children had lived. For humanity, that was always the point. The lever was just a means to an end, and that, perhaps, was the most stunning thing of all.